At the beginning of the film, we are in the year 1995 in Bhutan. 4 friends are hiking in the mountains, enjoying the beautiful nature of Bhutan. They climb the mountain and eventually have to cross a terrifying crevice. Although initially scared, they manage to cross the bridge without any problems. Not long after, having walked quite a distance, they take a rest. A man named Paul feels he hears something but sees nothing. He checks it out, but ends up falling into a cave. His friends start to panic, especially when Paul doesn't respond to their calls. Paul's friend Greg descends into the cave with the help of a rope. The place is very dark, but there he sees Paul sitting silently. Paul is staring at the skeleton of a large, frightening creature with a strange shape. Greg feels uncomfortable, but Paul says if Greg touches it, he will die. Hearing this, Greg is confused, but he still rescues his friend. Greg brings him up, and they decide to cancel the climb to treat Paul, who can't walk. During the rest, they see a house and decide to ask for help. However, no one is in the house, and while resting there, Paul still doesn't speak. Somehow, Paul is holding an object that looks like a bottle in his hand. It's unclear what happened to Paul, but it seems he has experienced trauma, even though there are no visible wounds. At night, the weather worsens, preventing them from continuing their journey. While waiting, Paul's girlfriend, Ruthie, holds the object Paul brought, thinking it might be a musical instrument, but nothing strange happens, so she chooses to sleep. However, in the middle of the night, she wakes up because she hears something. She checks it out but finds nothing. The next day, Greg and his girlfriend plan to go out to seek help and ask Ruthie to watch over Paul. While cleaning clothes, she sees someone outside and intends to ask for help. However, the person is silent, and as the figure approaches, Ruthie becomes frightened and hides inside the house. Ruthie becomes alert and takes a knife for protection. But when she enters, it turns out to be Greg and his girlfriend. They don't see what Ruthie saw, making them feel strange. While Ruthie sleeps, Paul whispers something without waking her. The next day, Ruthie wakes up but can't find Paul anywhere. Outside, they see footprints and follow them. They find Paul sitting in front of the bridge, blowing the object he found earlier. Paul starts whispering strangely. Then Ruthie stabs Greg and pushes Greg's girlfriend into the ravine. Ruthie also commits suicide by throwing herself off the cliff, while Paul continues to blow the strange object. 23 years later, a former police officer named John is seen eating at a restaurant. The waiters sing a birthday song because it's his birthday today. Then John returns home, where he lives alone because his wife and child have died in an accident. Outside, he sees his neighbor named Amanda, who comes to check on John's condition as he is depressed after being left by his wife and child. Amanda's father has also died, so she comes to comfort John. The next day, Amanda's mother named Nora wakes her up, but she can't find Amanda in her room. Nora eventually calls John for help. From Amanda's room, John finds bloodstains and a message written that the empty man made her do this. Soon after, the police arrive at Amanda's house, where Nora explains that Amanda didn't show any strange signs. The police explain that since Amanda's suitcase and clothes are missing, it's possible that Amanda ran away to a friend's house. John can only comfort Nora, but from Amanda's notebook, John finds a flyer for the Pontifex Institute, which might be a clue. Then John goes to Amanda's school and asks her friend named Devara, but Devara hasn't seen Amanda since yesterday. Devara explains that 2 nights ago, she, Amanda, and some friends were hanging out on a bridge as usual. After they finished, they were ready to go home, but Amanda found a bottle on the bridge. Amanda challenged them to call the empty man, which if you find an empty bottle on the bridge and blow into it while thinking of the empty man, the creature will come. On the first day you will hear him. On the second day, you will see him. And on the third day, the empty man will find you. They then blew into the empty bottle in turns, although many of them, including Devara, were doubtful. Later, Amanda sat cross-legged and blew the bottle towards the darkness of the bridge. From the dark direction of the bridge, they heard something that made them alert. However, out of fear, they chose to leave, and this was the last day Devara saw Amanda. Yesterday, at the mall, Devara saw Amanda whispering to one of their friends, just like Paul did to Ruthie. Then, John searches the homes of Amanda's friends who went to the bridge, but it turns out they have all disappeared. From one of the houses, John sees the words Pontifex Institute again. And because of this, John asks Nora about the Pontifex Institute, but Nora knows nothing about it. John then decides to visit the bridge where Amanda gathered with her friends. There, he finds a bottle and starts blowing into it. Suddenly, all the insect sounds around disappear, making the atmosphere quiet. He hears someone whistling and goes to check it out. John hears it from under the bridge and enters it. There, he finds the bodies of Amanda's friends who committed suicide, but Amanda is not among them. On the bridge wall, there is also writing that the empty man made them do this. At night, the bridge is filled with police, and they start checking if Amanda might be found around the bridge. On the other side, Devara is in the sauna of her house, because it turns out Devara is a rich kid. She uses the sauna alone, and there she starts to see the shadow of a creature that suddenly attacks her. Devara eventually dies, meaning everyone who called the empty man has now died on the third day, except for Amanda, whose whereabouts are currently unknown. Meanwhile, on the other side, John is at his home, trying to find out about the Pontifex Institute. He discovers that Pontifex is a kind of cult, and behind the flyer, John also finds the word tulpa. John then finds out the meaning of the writing, which turns out to be a kind of vessel for something supernatural. At the same time, Nora visits John, where Nora is still sad because she doesn't know the fate of Amanda at this time. In the middle of the night, John wakes up because he hears something. He checks it out but doesn't find anyone, except for an open door. The next day, John attends a seminar held by the Pontifex Institute. The leader of this seminar says many things, essentially that the empty man is considered a god, and it seems these people worship the creature. After the seminar, John meets the previous speaker and asks about the meaning of the empty man, but the man speaks strangely and also says he is very happy because John has returned. Of course, John is very confused because this is his first time here. He then asks a man named Garrett about Amanda, but Garrett says he doesn't know who Amanda is. But John, knowing Garrett is lying, eventually follows this man, but John gets lost and ends up in a room where he sees many mattresses that seem to be in a dormitory. There he also sees several bald men performing a ritual while looking at a black-colored picture. John ignores them and finally reaches a room. He sees several people forming a circle, seemingly calling something. This makes John curious, but he is caught and immediately expelled from the place. There he meets Garrett again, where Garrett explains that Amanda has been here, and this sect has big plans for Amanda. And now Amanda has been taken to a place. John goes to the said place, where he goes into the forest, and there he finds a cabin. There he finds Amanda's files and her friends, but John is shocked when he sees his own name. However, the map contains no data, and because of that, John enters another room. He finds many video recordings where the footage shows several men apparently performing a ritual. Something happens, and one of them seems to be possessed. The person makes a terrifying painting with his blood, and the painting is next to John, meaning the ritual was performed here. From a distance, he sees a light and decides to check it out. John enters the forest deeper and eventually crosses a bridge until he sees many people circling a fire. Seeing this, John feels scared and decides to go home. However, when he turns around, the fire goes out, and the people see him. Suddenly, the lights go out, and the people start chasing John. John finally manages to reach his car and eventually escapes. John goes to the police station to report what he experienced, where John brings Amanda's files. Unfortunately, the police can't do anything with this data. Then John goes to Nora's house, where he warns Nora about the possibility that Amanda and her friends have joined a cult. Afterwards, they receive a phone call, but when they answer, they hear nothing. Feeling the situation is dangerous, John decides to take Nora and escort her to a hotel. In the middle of the night, John wakes up again because he hears a strange noise. However, this time John sees the figure of the empty man, but the figure vanishes instantly. The next day, John decides to follow Garrett and his friends, who turn out to be going to a hospital. John follows them until he arrives at a room where he sees Garrett and his friends prostrating before a man being treated as if they are worshiping him. After Garrett leaves, John daringly kidnaps him and asks about the man in the hospital. Garrett explains that the man is like an antenna that sends signals through his mind, like telepathy. Of course, John doesn't believe it, but Garrett further explains that this man is possessed by something supernatural. That night, John returns to the Pontifex Institute, where he takes a file and finds a photo of the man being treated at the hospital. Strangely, John also finds files about himself, newspaper photos of accidents, and John growing up in San Francisco. There are even photos of his child and wife, but what really confuses him is a photo of himself sitting naked on a chair. Then John goes back to the hospital and asks a nurse about the man being treated. She explains that the man has been in a coma for 23 years, long before she started working there. John then enters the man's room, but there he meets Amanda. John is confused by what he sees because Amanda is shaving the man's beard. Amanda doesn't know the man's name, but he is like an antenna that can send messages from his mind. John then calls Nora, but strangely, Nora doesn't recognize him. It turns out that the man is Paul, who has been in a coma since the incident we saw at the beginning of the film. Amanda explains that Paul's body is weakening from containing a great power, so now they need a new vessel. Amanda then looks for a new vessel for this being, and that vessel is John, who turns out not to be human but an experimental creature created by this sect. All of John's memories are fabrications made by Amanda, where John himself has only been alive for 3 days. Suddenly, John is in a room with an empty chair. He approaches the chair, but what he sees is the skeleton that Paul found in the mountains. From this skull emerges a frightening figure. Initially, John manages to escape, but eventually the creature possesses John's body. He then returns home and sees that his house is just an empty shell. All his memories are false and are creations of the sect. When he enters his room, what he sees is Paul being treated in the hospital. John then shoots Paul in the head, instantly killing him. When he leaves the room, the doctors and nurses see him, but what they do is prostrate themselves, after which the film ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, because by subscribing you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.